Nothing important is going to happen in this video. You don't need to remember anything at all. If your eyes close while listening, that's perfectly fine. I'll simply be telling a slow, quiet, boring story from medieval times. There will be no sudden sounds, no surprises, and nothing you need to focus on. If your mind drifts, there's no need to bring it back. Just let my voice stay in the background like a distant sound you don't need to notice. You can listen as long as you want, or you can fall asleep whenever you're ready. Let's gently begin. Long before clocks measured time, a medieval village rested quietly between fields and trees. Nothing about this place was important. Nothing here was famous. It was simply a village where people lived slow lives and expected very little from the day. The village woke without urgency. There was no sudden sound to begin the morning. No bells rang loudly. No voices called out. Morning arrived slowly like a gentle weight lifting from the night. Stone houses stood close together, their walls thick and worn smooth by time. The roofs were made of wood and straw, layered carefully to keep out rain. Each house looked much like the next. No one tried to make their homes stand out. That was not the way of this place. Inside one house, a man slept a little longer. He had worked the fields the day before, moving slowly under the sun. His body felt heavy with familiar tiredness. He did not rush to wake. There was no reason to. In another house, a woman stirred slightly, adjusting the simple blanket that covered her. The room was quiet. The air was cool. She breathed slowly, letting sleep fade at its own pace. The village did not begin all at once. It never did. Outside, the dirt paths between the houses lay undisturbed. No footprints marked them yet. The ground held the coolness of the night, and the stones rested exactly where they had rested for years. At the center of the village stood a well. Its wooden frame creaked softly as it settled in the morning air. The bucket hung motionless, untouched. No one needed water just yet. Beyond the houses, fields stretched outward. The soil was dark and calm. Crops stood quietly, their work for the season already decided. They did not grow quickly. They did not change much. They simply existed. The people of the village accepted this pace. They were born into it. They grew old inside it. Days passed in patterns so familiar that they barely noticed them. A man eventually stepped outside his house. He moved slowly, stretching his arms slightly before letting them fall back to his sides. The morning air felt cool against his skin. He did not hurry. There was nothing waiting that could not wait a little longer. He walked toward the well, his steps unhurried. The bucket creaked softly as he lowered it into the darkness. Water met it without sound. He pulled it up slowly, letting drops fall back into the well. This was not a moment of thought. It did not require attention. It had been done thousands of times before, and it would be done thousands of times again. Nearby, another villager swept the dirt outside their doorway. The motion was slow and repetitive. Dust settled almost immediately. The ground looked no different than before. No one spoke much in the early hours. Words were saved for later, if needed at all. Silence was comfortable here. It did not feel empty. As the sun climbed higher, light touched the stone walls gently. It did not shine brightly. It did not demand notice. It simply rested on the village like a quiet presence. Inside a small house near the edge of the village, a child sat quietly, watching nothing in particular. There was no toy to play with, no task assigned yet. Time stretched easily in front of them. History books rarely mention places like this. Nothing dramatic happened here. No great battles were fought. No kings visited. The village existed quietly, and that was enough. People worked because work needed to be done, not because it led anywhere. Fields were tended, animals were fed. Repairs were made slowly, carefully, without hurry. A woman kneaded dough inside her home. Her hands moved at a steady pace. The dough changed shape gradually. There was no rush to finish. Bread would bake when it baked. Outside, a chicken crossed the path slowly, stopping occasionally for no clear reason. It pecked at the ground, then continued on. No one watched it. The village felt suspended in time. Days did not feel separate from one another. Yesterday blended into today, and today would blend into tomorrow. As midday approached, people gathered briefly, not to talk much, but to share space. A few exchanged quiet words about the weather. The sky looked the same as it usually did. The sun warmed the stones, and villagers sat where the light felt comfortable. No one counted the hours. Shadows moved slowly, marking time without numbers. Meals were simple: bread, water, vegetables. The same foods appeared again and again. They were familiar. They required no thought. After eating, people rested. Some lay down inside their homes. Others sat against walls, eyes half closed. The village allowed rest without guilt. This was medieval life for most people: slow, repetitive, predictable. It did not rush forward. It did not look back. In the afternoon, work resumed quietly. A man repaired a fence plank that had loosened. He tested it once, then left it alone. It did not need to be perfect. A woman carried water from the well, walking carefully so it would not spill. A few drops fell anyway. She did not mind. Children wandered short distances, never far. They learned the shape of the village by walking it again and again. Every path felt familiar. As the sun lowered, the air cooled slightly. Work slowed naturally. No one announced the end of the day. It simply arrived. Animals returned to their shelters. Doors were closed gently. The village began to fold inward. Inside the houses, lamps were lit softly. The light was weak and warm. Shadows moved slowly along the walls. Dinner was eaten quietly. There was little conversation. Everyone already knew how the day had gone. After eating, people sat or lay down. Some stared into the small flames of their lamps. Others closed their eyes early. Outside, darkness spread slowly across the fields. The wells stood unused again. The paths emptied. The village prepared for sleep without ceremony. Night sounds were minimal. No loud insects, no sudden calls. The quiet felt complete. Inside one home, breathing slowed, muscles relaxed. Sleep arrived naturally without effort. The medieval village rested, just as it always did. Nothing important happened, and nothing needed to. The night held the village gently, waiting for morning to return. The village did not wake suddenly the next day. It never did. Morning arrived the same way it always had, quietly and without effort. There was no clear moment when night ended and day began. Darkness simply faded, and light slowly took its place. The houses stood unchanged. Stone walls held the cool air inside, keeping the rooms calm and dim. Roofs rested heavily above, unmoving. Nothing looked new. Nothing needed to. Inside one house, a man opened his eyes briefly, then closed them again. There was no urgency to rise. The day would wait. In another home, a woman sat up slowly on the edge of her bed. Her feet touched the floor, cold and familiar. She remained still for a moment, letting her breathing settle. The village did not demand attention. It allowed people to move at their own pace. Outside, the dirt paths were visible again. They had not changed overnight. Stones lay where they always had. Dust waited to be disturbed. A faint breeze passed through the village, touching wooden doors and loose straw on rooftops. It did not stay long. It had nowhere to go. At the well, the bucket still hung quietly. The rope showed signs of wear from years of use. It held strong, though no one thought about it. Beyond the houses, the fields waited. Soil lay dark and ready, though nothing would be planted today. The crops already growing stood calmly, their work invisible. People stepped outside one by one. Movements were slow. No one spoke loudly. The morning did not require words. A man carried a simple tool toward the fields. He held it loosely, resting it on his shoulder. He walked without counting steps. A woman walked toward the well, pausing briefly to look at the sky. It looked ordinary. That was enough. Water was drawn, poured, carried away. Drops fell and disappeared into the ground. No one noticed. Inside a house near the edge of the village, bread dough rested under a cloth. It would rise, slowly. No one checked it often. Time moved without instruction. Children appeared near doorways, standing quietly at first. They watched the village without expectation. Soon they wandered a little farther, then stopped again. No one guided them closely. The village itself felt safe enough. As the sun climbed, light warmed the stones. People found places to sit. Some leaned against walls. Others stood without purpose. Work began without announcement. Tools were picked up. Tasks resumed where they had ended the day before. A fence was repaired, one plank at a time. A basket was mended carefully. Each movement followed the last without thought. There was no pressure to finish quickly. The day stretched wide and empty ahead. A man paused in his work, resting his hands on his knees. He looked across the fields. Nothing had changed since yesterday. The air remained calm. Sounds were few. A soft footstep, a tool touching wood, a distant bird. The village seemed to absorb every sound, making it quieter. As midday approached, people gathered briefly, not for conversation, but for rest. They sat together, facing different directions. Food was shared quietly. Bread passed from hand to hand. Water was sipped slowly. No one rushed to return to work. Rest was allowed. After eating, some lay down inside their homes. Others closed their eyes where they sat. The village slowed again. Shadows shifted slowly along the ground. No one followed them. The afternoon passed without notice. Tasks were completed gradually. Some were left unfinished. No one minded. The village had learned patience over many years. There was no reward for hurry. As the sun lowered, people returned to their homes. Doors were closed gently. Animals were guided inside without noise. The well stood unused again. The bucket rested. Light faded from the sky. Lamps were lit one by one. Their glow was soft and weak. Inside the homes, people ate quietly. The same foods, prepared the same way. Conversation was minimal. There was nothing new to discuss. After eating, people sat or lay down. Bodies relaxed naturally. Sleep arrived early for some. Outside, darkness settled over the village. Paths disappeared again. Fields became shapes without detail. The village grew still. Breathing slowed inside the houses. Muscles softened. Thoughts faded. Another ordinary day ended without ceremony. The medieval village rested once more, unchanged and calm. Nothing important happened, and the night was content to keep it that way. The night passed without being noticed. No one marked the hours. No one listened for signs of morning. Darkness remained until it slowly decided to leave. When light returned, it did not arrive suddenly. It rested softly on the edges of the village, touching rooftops and stone walls with no intention of waking anyone. Inside the houses, people slept deeply. Their breathing was slow and steady. Blankets rose and fell gently. Sleep did not ask for permission to stay longer. The village felt heavier in the early morning, as if the night had settled into the ground and had not yet lifted away. Outside, the paths were empty. No footsteps disturbed the dust. The stones remained cool. The well stood quietly at the center of the village. Its wooden frame cast a long, soft shadow. The bucket hung motionless, waiting without expectation. Beyond the houses, the fields remained calm. Crops stood upright, unchanged. The soil held moisture from the night, dark and quiet. A faint sound came from inside one house. Someone turned over in their sleep. The sound faded quickly, absorbed by the thick walls. The village did not respond. It did not need to. Eventually, a door opened slowly. A man stepped outside, pausing in the doorway. He stood still for a moment, feeling the morning air. He did not stretch. He did not hurry. He simply stood. The sky looked pale and familiar. Clouds moved slowly without direction. The man walked toward the well. His steps were soft. He did not look around. Water was drawn quietly. The rope creaked slightly, then settled again. He carried the bucket back inside. Drops fell onto the path. They disappeared without leaving marks. Inside another house, a woman sat at a small table. She placed a bowl in front of her and waited. The bowl remained empty for a moment. She did not rush to fill it. Time felt wide and unmeasured. Children appeared gradually. They stood near doorways, watching the village without curiosity. Everything looked the same as yesterday. They walked slowly, stopping often. There was no place they needed to be. Work began without signal. A man walked toward the fields with a tool resting on his shoulder. Another followed, a short distance behind. Their steps matched the pace of the morning. In the fields, they moved slowly. Soil was turned carefully. Plants were checked without urgency. Nothing required immediate attention. The sun rose higher, warming the air slightly. People found comfortable places to sit or stand. No one watched the time. Inside one home, bread baked slowly. The smell drifted through the room, faint and steady. No one checked the oven often. It would be ready when it was ready. The village did not measure success by speed. It measured it by continuation. Midday arrived quietly. People gathered not to celebrate, but to rest. Food was shared without ceremony. After eating, some people leaned back against walls. Others lay down inside their homes. The village slowed again. The afternoon passed without distinction. Tasks continued and then stopped. A fence was repaired only halfway. The rest would wait. A basket was mended slowly, the weaving uneven but strong enough. No one judged the work. It only needed to function. As the sun lowered, light changed gently. Shadows stretched across the paths. Animals moved toward shelter without being guided. They knew the routine as well as the people. Doors closed softly. Voices faded. Inside the houses, lamps were lit. Their glow filled small rooms with warmth. People ate quietly. There was no rush to finish. The night felt long. After eating, bodies relaxed naturally. Some people lay down immediately. Others sat in silence. Outside, darkness returned fully. The village became a collection of quiet shapes. The well stood unused again. The fields disappeared into shadow. Breathing slowed inside every house. The village rested deeply. Another day passed without importance, and sleep held the village without effort. The village moved deeper into its routine. Days did not feel separate anymore. Morning, afternoon, and evening blended together like the same quiet thought repeating itself without change. This day began like all the others. Light returned slowly, resting on rooftops and stone walls. It did not wake anyone suddenly, it simply waited until people noticed it. Inside the houses, sleep lingered, bodies remained heavy, blankets were adjusted once, then left alone. Breathing stayed slow and even. No one counted how long they slept. Outside, the air felt calm and still. The paths between the houses looked unchanged. Dust rested where it had settled the day before. At the center of the village, the well stood as it always had. Its stones were smooth from years of hands touching them. The rope hung quietly, showing signs of age, but still strong. No one approached it immediately. Beyond the houses, the fields rested. Crops stood quietly, their leaves unmoving. The soil held its shape, dark and cool. A faint sound came from the edge of the village. A door opened and closed softly. A villager stepped outside and paused, as if remembering something, then continued walking without urgency. The morning allowed slowness. A woman carried a basket from her house and placed it near the doorway. She did not fill it yet. There was time. A man leaned against a wall, eyes half closed, feeling the warmth of the rising sun. He stayed there longer than necessary. The village accepted these pauses. Work began slowly. A few people walked toward the fields, others remained near their homes. No one gave instructions. In the fields, movements were careful and steady. Hands touched soil gently. Tools were lifted and lowered without force. The work did not feel heavy. It felt familiar. Time passed quietly. Inside one house, water warmed over a small flame. The sound was soft and constant. No one watched it closely. A child sat nearby, watching the light move across the floor. The pattern changed slowly, then stopped changing. Mid-morning arrived without announcement. People shifted positions. Some sat, some stood. The village remained quiet. A man walked toward the well and drew water slowly. The rope creaked once, then settled. He did not rush. The bucket was filled and carried away. A few drops spilled and disappeared into the ground. No one noticed. As the sun reached higher, the village warmed gently. Stone walls held the heat. Shadows shortened. People gathered briefly to eat. Food was simple and familiar. Bread was torn quietly. Water was shared. Conversation was minimal. Words were unnecessary. After eating, the village slowed again. Some people returned to work. Others rested. A few lay down inside their homes, eyes closing naturally. The afternoon stretched wide and empty. Work continued without purpose beyond completion. A fence was adjusted. A tool was repaired. Each task moved forward slowly. Nothing demanded attention. The village felt unchanged, as if time itself had stopped moving forward and had begun to circle gently. As the sun lowered, the light softened. Shadows grew longer. The air cooled slightly. Animals moved toward shelter. People followed without instruction. Doors closed quietly. Lamps were lit. Inside the houses, people ate once more. The day did not need to be discussed. Afterward, bodies relaxed. Muscles softened. Sleep arrived easily. Outside, darkness returned slowly. The village became silent again. The wells stood unused. The fields disappeared into shadow. Breathing slowed everywhere. Another ordinary day ended. Nothing important happened, and nothing needed to. The village rested, held gently by the night, waiting to repeat the same quiet day again. The village continued without noticing itself. There was no sense of progress here. Days did not feel like steps forward. They felt like the same quiet surface, gently touched again and again by time. Morning returned slowly, the same way it always had. Light appeared without direction, settling softly on stone walls, wooden doors, and empty paths. Inside the houses, people slept longer than they planned to. Sleep felt heavy and calm. No one felt the need to rise quickly. In one house, a man turned slightly in his sleep. His breathing stayed slow. The room remained dim and cool. He did not wake yet. In another house, a woman opened her eyes briefly, then closed them again. The day would still be there later. The village did not expect anything early. Outside, the dirt paths rested quietly. No new marks appeared. Stones lay exactly where they had the day before. The well stood at the center, unchanged. Its wooden roof creaked softly as the air shifted. The bucket remained still. Beyond the houses, the fields waited without urgency. Crops stood quietly, their leaves dull and unmoving. The soil held the night's coolness. Time passed without being counted. Eventually, a door opened. A villager stepped outside and stood still, letting the morning air settle around them. They did not stretch. They did not look around much. They walked slowly toward the well. The rope creaked as the bucket was lowered. Water met it quietly. The bucket rose again, heavy but familiar. Drops fell onto the ground. They disappeared without sound. The villager carried the water away, steps unhurried. More doors opened gradually. People appeared one by one. Movements were slow and simple. No one spoke loudly. Some did not speak at all. A man leaned against a wall, eyes half closed. The stone felt warm against his back. He stayed there longer than necessary. A woman placed a basket near her doorway. She did not fill it yet. There was no hurry. Children stood quietly near the edges of the paths. They watched nothing in particular. They walked a few steps, then stopped again. The village allowed stillness. Work began slowly without signal. A few people moved toward the fields. Others stayed near their homes. In the fields, hands touched soil gently. Tools were lifted and lowered in steady rhythm. The work felt repetitive and calm. No one tried to finish quickly. Inside a small house, dough rested under a cloth. It rose slowly, unnoticed. No one checked it often. The morning passed quietly. As the sun climbed higher, the air warmed slightly. Shadows shifted across the paths. No one followed them. Midday arrived without ceremony. People gathered briefly, sitting close but facing different directions. Food was shared simply. Bread was torn. Water was sipped. There was a little conversation. Everyone already knew how the day felt. After eating, the village slowed again. Some people lay down inside their homes. Others sat against walls, eyes closing naturally. The afternoon stretched wide and empty. Work resumed gently. A fence was repaired one plank at a time. A basket was mended slowly. Some tasks were left unfinished. No one minded. The village had learned patience long ago. As the sun lowered, the light softened, the air cooled, movements became slower. Animals returned to shelter. Doors closed quietly. Inside the houses, lamps were lit. Their glow was weak and warm. People ate again, the same food prepared the same way. Afterward, bodies relaxed, muscles softened. Sleep arrived early. Outside, darkness spread slowly across the village. Paths disappeared. Fields became shapes without detail. The well stood unused once more. Breathing slowed inside every house. The village rested deeply. Another day passed without importance. Nothing changed, and that was how the village preferred it. The village existed in a way that did not require attention. Time moved through it gently, without stopping, without rushing. No one tried to measure it. No one felt the need to keep track of the hours. Morning arrived again, quietly and without announcement. The sky lightened slowly, as if it was unsure whether it needed to be seen at all. Stone houses remained still. Their walls held the coolness of the night. Wooden doors stayed closed a little longer than necessary. Inside, people slept deeply. Breathing was slow and steady. Blankets rested loosely over tired bodies. Sleep did not feel fragile. It felt secure. In one house, a man shifted slightly, then became still again. His thoughts did not follow him into waking. They remained distant and unformed. In another house, a woman lay awake briefly, listening to nothing. The silence felt familiar. She closed her eyes again without concern. Outside, the paths between houses waited patiently. Dust lay undisturbed. Small stones rested exactly where they had been for years. The well stood in the center of the village, unchanged. Its wooden roof showed signs of age. The rope hung quietly, relaxed by its own weight. Beyond the village, the fields rested in wide stillness. Crops stood without movement. The soil looked dark and calm. Nothing asked to be done yet. Eventually, a door opened slowly. A villager stepped outside and stood still, allowing the air to settle around them. They did not stretch. They did not look far. They walked toward the well with unmeasured steps. The rope moved softly as the bucket was lowered. The sound echoed briefly, then faded. Water met the bucket gently. The bucket rose again, heavy and familiar. A few drops fell back into the well. The villager carried the water away. The path accepted the footsteps without response. More doors opened slowly. The village revealed itself one movement at a time. A man leaned against a wall, eyes half closed. He felt the warmth of the rising sun through the stone. He remained there longer than needed. A woman placed a cloth outside her doorway. She smoothed it once, then left it alone. Children appeared near the edges of the paths. They walked a few steps, then stopped. They looked around without curiosity. The village allowed pauses. Work began gradually. A few people walked toward the fields, others stayed near their homes. In the fields, hands touched soil carefully. Tools moved in slow rhythm. Each movement followed the last without thought. There was no urgency to complete anything. Inside a small house, water warmed slowly over a flame. The sound was faint and steady. No one watched it closely. Morning passed quietly. As the sun climbed, the air warmed gently. Shadows shifted along the paths. No one noticed. Midday arrived without signal. People gathered briefly to eat. Food was simple, bread was shared, water was passed quietly. Conversation was minimal. Silence felt easier. After eating, the village slowed again. Some people rested inside their homes, others sat outside, eyes closing naturally. The afternoon stretched long and empty. Work resumed slowly. A fence was adjusted slightly. A basket was repaired carefully. Some tasks remained unfinished. No one felt concerned. The village did not value completion over rest. As the sun lowered, light softened, the air cooled. Animals returned to shelter without being guided. Doors closed gently. Inside the houses, lamps were lit. Their glow filled the rooms softly. People ate again. There was no discussion of the day. Afterward, bodies relaxed, muscles softened. Sleep arrived without effort. Outside, darkness settled slowly across the village. Paths disappeared. Fields became shadows. The well stood unused once more. Breathing slowed inside every house. The village rested deeply, unchanged and calm. Another day passed quietly. Nothing important happened, and the village remained content to let the next day arrive the same way. The village had forgotten how many days had passed, not because time moved quickly, but because nothing marked its movement. Each day arrived quietly, stayed gently, and left without being noticed. Morning returned again, slowly, patiently. The sky grew lighter without effort. No sudden brightness appeared. Light simply spread, thin and soft, across the village. Stone houses stood close together, unchanged. Their walls held the night's coolness. Wooden doors remained closed, resting in familiar positions. Inside the houses, people slept deeply. Their bodies knew this rhythm well. Breathing stayed slow, muscles remained relaxed. In one house, a man lay still, listening to nothing. His thoughts did not form clearly. Sleep held him without resistance. In another house, a woman adjusted her blanket slightly, then became still again. The room remained quiet. The village did not rush anyone awake. Outside, the paths lay empty. Dust rested undisturbed. Small stones remained exactly where they had always been. The well stood silently at the center of the village. Its wooden frame looked worn but stable. The rope hung loosely, unmoving. Beyond the houses, the fields rested in wide openness. Crops stood quietly unchanged. The soil appeared dark and calm. Nothing demanded attention. Eventually, a door opened softly. A villager stepped outside and stood for a moment, feeling the air. They did not stretch. They did not look far. They walked slowly toward the well. The rope moved gently as the bucket was lowered. The sound echoed briefly, then faded. Water met the bucket quietly. The bucket rose again, heavy and familiar. A few drops fell back into the well. The villager carried the water away, footsteps slow and even. More doors opened gradually. The village revealed itself piece by piece. A man leaned against a wall, eyes half closed. The stone felt warm against his back. He stayed longer than needed. A woman placed a small container near her doorway. She did not fill it yet. There was no reason to hurry. Children appeared near the paths. They walked a few steps, then stopped. They looked around without curiosity. The village allowed stillness. Work began slowly, without signal. A few people moved toward the fields. Others stayed near their homes. In the fields, hands touched soil gently. Tools moved in slow, familiar rhythm. Each motion followed the last without thought. No one tried to finish quickly. Inside one house, dough rested under a cloth. It rose slowly, unnoticed. No one checked it often. The morning stretched quietly. As the sun climbed higher, the air warmed slightly. Shadows shifted across the paths. No one followed them. Midday arrived without announcement. People gathered briefly, sitting close but facing different directions. Food was shared simply. Bread was torn slowly. Water was sipped without hurry. Conversation was minimal. Silence felt complete. After eating, the village slowed again. Some people lay down inside their homes. Others rested outside, eyes closing naturally. The afternoon felt long and empty. Work resumed gently. A fence was adjusted slightly. A basket was repaired carefully. Some tasks remained unfinished. No one felt concerned. The village did not measure success by completion. As the sun lowered, the light softened, the air cooled. Animals moved toward shelter on their own. Doors closed gently. Inside the houses, lamps were lit. Their glow was weak and warm. People ate again, the same food, prepared the same way. Afterward, bodies relaxed. muscles softened. Sleep arrived without effort. Outside, darkness spread slowly across the village. Paths disappeared. Fields became shadows. The well stood unused once more. Breathing slowed inside every house. The village rested deeply. Another day passed quietly. Nothing important happened, and the village remained content, ready to repeat the same calm day again. The night stayed longer than expected. Not because it was dark, but because no one measured when it should end. The village slept without concern for hours or moments. Breathing filled the rooms softly. Blankets rested gently over still bodies. No one turned suddenly. No one dreamed loudly. Outside, the air remained calm. The sky held its darkness patiently. Then very slowly light returned, not as a signal, not as an event. It simply appeared. The edges of the sky softened. Darkness loosened its grip. The village remained asleep. Stone walls absorbed the new light without reflecting it. Wooden beams inside houses stayed dim and quiet. In one home, a man opened his eyes briefly, then closed them again. There was no reason to wake yet. In another, a woman shifted her position slightly. The sound of fabric brushing fabric faded quickly. The village stayed suspended between sleep and waking. Eventually, a rooster called out once. The sound felt distant and unimportant. Morning arrived without urgency. Doors stayed closed. Paths remained empty. Dust did not move. The well waited, unchanged. After a long while, footsteps appeared again. Slow, familiar, unhurried. A villager stepped outside and stood still, letting the air touch their face. They did not think about the day ahead. They walked toward the well, stopping once, then continuing. The bucket descended slowly. The rope creaked softly. Water met wood in a dull sound. The bucket rose. The villager carried it away, spilling a little without noticing. Other villagers followed their own rhythms. Some stayed inside longer. Others wandered briefly, then stopped. The fields welcomed the day quietly. Hands touched plants without focus. Tools moved lazily, repeating motions learned long ago. Nothing needed improvement. The soil accepted every step without complaint. Time stretched wide. At midday, the village paused again. Shadows shortened. Heat settled gently. People sat where they were. No one gathered formally. No one announced rest. Food was eaten slowly. Chewing took its time. Swallowing felt effortless. After eating, many did nothing at all. Eyes closed. Heads leaned back. The afternoon held them gently. In one corner of the village, a basket sat half-repaired. The work remained unfinished. No one worried. The sun drifted lower. Light became golden, then pale. Sounds softened further. Animals moved quietly, guided by habit. Doors opened and closed. Lamps appeared again inside houses. Evening arrived without warning. Meals repeated themselves. Bread, water, simple warmth. Afterward, people settled into stillness once more. Bodies recognized the pattern. Blankets were adjusted. Lamps dimmed. Breathing slowed. Outside, darkness returned, steady and calm. The village dissolved into quiet again. Nothing changed. Nothing needed to. Another day passed, nearly unnoticed. And the village slept, deeply and completely, ready to continue this gentle cycle without end. The village did not wake suddenly. Morning arrived the same way it always did, without effort and without notice. The light appeared slowly, touching roofs, then walls, then the ground. No one reacted. Inside the houses, bodies remained still. Breathing stayed deep and even. Blankets rose and fell gently. The air inside smelled of wood, old stone, and rest. Outside, the paths waited. Dust rested where it had been the night before. Nothing had shifted. After a long while, a door opened. It did not make a loud sound, just a small movement of wood against wood. A villager stepped out and stood quietly. They did not stretch. They did not hurry. They simply stood. The sky was pale. The village looked the same as always. After standing for some time, the villager began to walk. Slow steps, familiar direction. At the well, the bucket was already there. The rope hung loosely. The villager lowered it without thought. The water returned. The bucket was lifted. No one watched. Nearby, another villager passed by, nodding once without stopping. The fields accepted the morning calmly. Hands moved over soil. Fingers brushed leaves. Tools rested more than they worked. Nothing was counted. Time drifted. The village did not measure progress. It did not track success. The sun climbed, slowly and quietly. Shadows moved just enough to be noticed, but not enough to matter. By midday, movement slowed even more. People sat where they were. Some leaned against walls. Some rested on the ground. Food appeared without ceremony. Bread was broken. Water was shared. No one spoke loudly. After eating, stillness returned. Eyes closed again. Heads lowered. The village seemed to breathe together. The afternoon stretched endlessly. In one house, a candle remained unlit. There was no need yet. In another, a window stayed open, letting air move gently through the room. Cloth stirred slightly, then settled. As the sun lowered, the light softened, the air cooled. Animals moved closer to shelter, guided by habit rather than urgency. The village followed. Doors closed slowly, lamps glowed faintly. Evening repeated itself exactly as before. Meals were simple, movements were slow, conversations were minimal. Afterward, bodies found their places. Beds creaked quietly. Blankets covered shoulders. Breathing deepened. Outside, the night returned without resistance. Stars appeared one by one, unnoticed. The village rested fully. Another day passed without leaving a mark, and the cycle continued, smooth and unbroken, carrying everyone gently towards sleep again. The village did not know that this was the last day of anything. It never did. Days were not numbered. They were not remembered. They were not compared. They simply arrived and passed. Morning returned again, exactly the same. Light slid softly across the roofs, touching nothing with urgency. The stone walls accepted it quietly. Inside the houses, breathing continued, long, slow, even. No bells rang, no voices called. The village woke the way it always had, without realizing it was awake. One person sat up on a bed, another turned slightly and stayed asleep. Another opened their eyes and closed them again. Time did not react. Eventually doors opened. Wood moved against hinges, familiar and gentle. Feet touched the ground, cold stone under skin. No reaction. Outside the air was still. The path was unchanged. Dust waited patiently. A villager walked toward the well, steps placed where they had always been placed. The rope hung, the bucket waited, water rose slowly. Another villager passed, not stopping, not greeting, not avoiding. Fields lay open and calm. Hands touched soil. Fingers pressed gently. Tools rested more than they worked. Nothing needed to be finished. The sun moved slow and steady like it had promised to do forever. Shadows drifted. No one followed them. By late morning, the village had already begun to slow again. Movement became optional. Some villagers sat near walls, backs resting against stone warmed by light. Others stood without purpose, looking at nothing. The sound of the village was almost silent, only breath. Only distant birds, only wind brushing fabric. Midday arrived unnoticed. Food appeared again, always the same: bread, water, simple and quiet. No one rushed to eat, no one waited either. After eating, bodies grew heavier, eyes closed, heads leaned. The village slept lightly, even while sitting. Afternoon stretched endlessly. The sun seemed to pause, then continue out of habit. Nothing changed. In one house, a blanket shifted slightly, then became still. In another, a window let in air that moved a curtain just enough to be seen. Then not at all. Time loosened. Hours blended. Thoughts faded. As the light softened, evening approached the village without announcement. Animals moved closer to shelter. People followed. Doors closed slowly. Lamps glowed faintly, barely lighting the rooms. The village dimmed. Dinner passed quietly, like all the others before it. Afterward, bodies returned to beds. Blankets were pulled gently. Breathing deepened again. Outside, night settled completely. Stars appeared, small and distant. The village slept fully now. No memory of the day remained. No anticipation of tomorrow existed. Only rest, only stillness, only the slow, endless rhythm of a medieval village that never needed to change, and in that unchanging calm, sleep stayed deep and undisturbed.